I want to go nuts with this episode.
Well, as long as you don't bust a nut in the process.
Well, sometimes you feel like a nut.
Yeah, and sometimes...
I don't think we can get away with that for copyright reasons.
Yeah, that's why I stopped before saying sometimes you don't. Oh.
Well, you separated it with words, so now they can't copyright that.
Now what we've got is artistic license by reinterpreting the initial artistic piece to our own end.
They say, go nuts.
Yeah.
Okay.
So nuts.
Nuts.
Speaking of nuts.
Nuts.
You're about to put a new nut on the project guitar, right?
I am. And we have replaced the tuners, which was a surprisingly easy job to do, but it made a good impact because those tuners that came off the guitar were kind of junky.
Yeah.
The new ones are really, really nice. But now it's time to move our way down the guitar to the nut. And the nut is a very key, very important part of the guitar because it is one of 3 places in which the string makes physical contact with the actual guitar.
Right.
So it makes contact at the saddle, it'll make contact at the nut, and in between, wherever you put your finger down on a fret.
Right.
So you push that string down and it touches the frets. The nut is a super important part of that whole equation, not only from a construction point of view, but also from a materials point of view. And let's talk about the materials first, because the material that it's made of kind of determines a lot of the tone of your guitar, because even if you are fretting a note, the other half of that string that's not in between your finger and the saddle is still vibrating a little bit, and some of that tone goes into the neck of the guitar.
Right.
And also comes back out of the neck of the guitar and into the string. The types of materials we can use are plastic.
Yep.
We can use bone. There's all kinds of different metals that nuts have been made out of. You can use roller nuts. You can use brass nuts. There's people who have made stainless steel nuts before. And all of these materials work out, but they all have their individual properties. And that property that's most important to us as musicians and as sound makers is the resonant frequency of that material. So the resonant frequency is basically the frequency, the tone frequency at which that material vibrates and transmits mechanical vibration the best. And in the case of plastic, that resonant frequency is pretty far up there.
Right.
In the case of brass or steel, it's really far up there. And that's why a metal nut tends to have a glassier and much more trebly sound. In the case of bone, that resonant frequency, that resonant peak is a lot lower down in the frequency range, but it's like right in the sweet spot of the mid-range of a guitar.
It's just got me thinking about that. I wonder if the reason that we like that as humans is our ears are where? They're in our skull, which is surrounded by what? Bone. So that is comfortable to us. You know, maybe dogs really like a brass nut.
If dogs could play guitar.
I think that's what they'd go for, most definitely.
Exactly. So in the case of this guitar, this Les Paul copy that we're going to give away, it came with a plastic nut on it, but if I think about the types of nuts that I would usually provision on a customer's guitar, bone would be my first choice. Horn is another great material for that. The horn is a lot like bone, and it has very similar characteristics.
I really like the, was it the bison horn?
That's exactly the bison horn.
Really, really nice sounding. We've done a couple of instruments with bison horn nuts that Mark's done. They
turn out great. They turn out fantastic. In addition to the material that we make a nut out of, the construction of a nut is also absolutely key to, number one, playability, how it feels on your hand when your hand is down there at the base of the neck, or at the headstock. Is that the base? I don't even know.
Cut the far end. Down at the cul-de-sac.
Exactly. The turnaround place. We're coming back up fretboard.
Yeah. On that note, on the construction note, one of the things that I am embarrassed to say, I only really understood recently, and when I say recently, I'm going to say like in the past 5 years, which is just embarrassing. I've been playing guitar since I was 15, and
so
I'm at least 23 now. Is how much the nut is responsible for how well the guitar will stay in tune.
Absolutely. The key thing there is not just where those nut slots are, the actual width of the nut slot itself, the shape of it, if it's a V shape or if it's absolutely straight up and down parallel. Also, the angle at which the slot is cut, if it angles straight across the nut or if it slopes down a little bit, or God forbid if it slopes up a little bit, you don't want that.
No.
That determines how well your guitar will stay in tune, how easy it is to tune it to pitch. Have you ever had that phenomenon where you're tuning a guitar to pitch and you hear that string go ping?
Yep.
That's the sign of a not so good nut.
Yep.
So it's important to us to not only create the slots evenly across the nut, but also to make sure they're shaped correctly, so
Right.
that they don't catch that string and bind that string in the slot. This guitar, I believe, came equipped with 10 through 46.
That seems pretty
gauge
standard,
string.
I think.
That's your standard set of 10s.
Yeah.
And I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to put 10s on the guitar. That seems to be pretty much the de facto standard for most guitars nowadays.
Excellent.
I'll slot the nut for those, and we'll be off to the races.
Sweet. I'm looking forward to this, partly because, as we said in a couple of the other videos, unfortunately for you, it's not a half bag guitar to begin with. So the level, are you starting to learn a little more about?
I can tell you, the more I look at and inspect this guitar, the more I'm amazed at the quality and craftsmanship that went into this guitar as it came off of a factory line.
Yeah.
They're making hundreds of these guitars every day.
Yep.
And for this level of quality, it's just astonishing. This wasn't possible 10 years ago.
Yeah.
That said, there is nothing like handcrafted, USA-made quality, and being able to pay attention to one instrument as opposed to having to pay attention to a million instruments.
Yeah.
There's a difference in your motivation and your ability to deliver a certain level of quality.
Absolutely.
So then, long story short, the nut that I put on this guitar is going to be a better quality nut than what came on the guitar.
And that's the main thing we're doing here.
Gonna give it away.
Yep. Gonna give it away. So I guess that's you're off to the races now.
I think it's
Didn't we
time to
say
go make
that
a nut.
already?
I'm off to the races. It's time to go nuts.
Time to yeah. You're about to pecan the process.
Oh, you're a nut. So what we're going to have to do is just going to have to score the finish and score the glue line in between the nut and the neck itself. We'll also have to score here along the binding, here along the top of the nut on both the fretboard side and the headstock side, and get the other side as well. Now, fortunately, I've got a set of brand new X-Acto blades, and so we got a nice, fresh, very sharp X-Acto blade, and that should help us score that glue out to the point where we can actually remove the nut. Here comes the fun part, actually hacking this thing out of the guitar. And to do that, we're gonna have to cut it in half. Make that slot a little deeper. So now we got a nice big slot across the top of the entire nut that goes all the way down to the bottom, almost. What we'll do now is just take a pair of pliers and on either side of this, squeeze it gently and break that glue bond that we had scored out earlier, and hopefully it'll come out cleanly. Beautiful. I felt it crush, and it should come out a little easier now. I'm hoping to not have to take a chisel to this. There we go. That's half of it. Now, take a hammer and some scrap. So just a little bit of junk left behind, but that's what files are for. There we go. Look at that. Awesome. There we go. Dun, dun, dun. I have one. So that gives us one chance to get this right. Now, I've made a lot of nuts before. I've also blown it a bunch of times. What can happen is you can make the nut blank too skinny. You can you can file it down too short, and it won't fit into the slot right, and you'll feel a gap there. But the most common thing that happens with a nut is when you're actually slotting the nut to fit the strings. If you slot that nut too low, and the strings can then ride down to the point where they buzz on the fret, and so that's pretty much it. That's starting over time. So I don't want to start over, and I certainly don't want to have to order more of these to be able to do this. So one chance. I think we can do it though. I can pull it off. 21/100ths of an inch. And this isn't 35, this is 25. It's a quarter inch.
Oh, well, there you go.
And our Martin nut blank is 27/100ths. So, you guys get to see how I very, very precisely size a nut blank to the proper slot width.
One thing I'm doing is I'm measuring all four corners for width. And the reason I want to do that is because you're doing this by hand, you might apply more pressure in one place than you would another. So you want to take off just a tiny, tiny bit amount of material, but you want to do it evenly. So I'm seeing where I'm putting the most pressure, and I'm adjusting while I'm on the belt tube. There we go. Perfecto. Nailed it. No play. Doesn't even rock very much. Feels beautiful. Grab a pencil. And just roughly mark how much we're going to have to cut off. Come over here to the vise. Get a little bit of an overhang. That's exactly what I want. Now we use the radius of the fretboard itself to scribe a line across the nut with a very small lead pencil. And that gives us the idea of what the radius of the fretboard is going to look like. It's not fully seated. So we'll take a little bit off the top of here. Not too much though.
It's not perfect, and I know that there's better tools to do this job. It's just that I don't have those tools. I think a lot of people would use an oscillating sander to do what I just did, or some people would actually just take a coping saw and actually cut that line across the top. But I prefer the gentle, gradual nature of a sander, and I'm so used to using my Harbor Freight belt sander that I've owned for 15 years that I get good results with this, so I'm good with it. But can we use the old nut to help us figure out where to put the slots? Now, looking at the slots on this old nut, I don't like the placement of those strings. I think that it's too narrow, and that's one of the things that I noticed when I was playing it, was that the string width at the nut was a little bit cramped, for lack of a better word. And so I think what I'd like to do is I would like to scribe in the lines for the outer strings, the E strings, by eye, and then what we'll do is we'll use a special tool to figure out where the rest of the strings should go. So the thing to do is to seat the nut fully in there, make sure it's even on both sides, and then I like to put on my magnifiers and actually just eyeball in where I think those outside slots should go. Ken and I had a discussion about this not long ago about how far in the strings should be from the edge of the fretboard, and I think that you came up with a measurement of something like, what was it, 3/16 or was it 1/16? It was something really, really small.
It was small. I can't remember what it was off the top of my head.
And I said, I don't know. I just eyeball it, and I've just done this so many times on so many different guitars that I really I know where the high E and the low E strings should go on a guitar. And Kent went back and actually measured, and whatever measurement you came up with, it was exactly that on all of the nuts that I've made for all the guitars we've done. So
Yeah, it was kind of creepy.
So you'll notice I've got these 6 dots on this rule. And that's just because I have used this particular section of the string spacing rule many, many times. And you'll notice that on this particular guitar, if I were to use these 6 slots, those would not quite line up. So I need to go a little bit wider than that. So we'll go over 1 slot. And that almost lines up. Let's go over 1 more. So does that line up?
I think you could go farther.
I think you're right. I think that's about... Let's try 1 more.
That looks pretty good.
That looks really good right there. So now it's just a case of come in and mark the rest of the slots precisely along these lines. And hopefully parallax will not destroy me.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got some slots scribed on the top, and now we're going to have to do this for real and actually start cutting into the bone to make this happen. So this is a very fine operation, so I'm going to put my magnifiers down to do this. Start at an angle to make sure that the file doesn't walk, and go smooth. Okay, there we go. All right, and we do this for the rest of the slots. Kind of handy that we used a pencil, which is made of graphite, to do these slots, because that gives us a little extra lubrication. I'm putting these in really shallowly, and the reason for that is because I'm going to pull this off and put it on the guitar, and if I don't like what I see, I can sand these out really easily and start over. Yeah, that looks exactly beautiful. I realize this nut's still a little bit tall, but I don't like to take off too much in any one operation. So what we'll do is we'll cut these slots down to almost the right depth, and then we'll come back in and take the top of the nut off and do a final shaping. There we go. All right, so now I've got these slots roughly cut. I'm happy with the spacing. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take each of these slots down to the level I'm happy with, and at that point I will go ahead and finish shaping and then polish out the nut. It's that simple. All right, now we shape it. I've got the general shape, the curve across the top, already done. But now I need to get in there and roll it off for comfort. I should actually start with the 220. Nice and shiny. The slots are beautiful, exactly where they should be. Let's glue it in. Yeah. Feels great, looks great. Voila. Okay, folks, we have made a new nut. That's really all there is to it. I think this guitar is going to play a little bit better. A little bit, tiny bit better with a new nut on it. I may come back in and resurface the top of this again, just because I don't like how deep some of these slots turned out on the base side of the nut. You want to have as little material there as possible to avoid having your strings bind up in the nut itself. But I want to wait to do that until after we do the fret work on this guitar, which is coming up in the next episode of Project Janus. But we're going to get to that. That's going to change the height of the frets, and that's going to change how exactly low we can go with the fret slots. So I want to make sure we can do that before we do that final touch up on the nut. If you like the video, subscribe if you haven't. Let's get back to work.